Here, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so I welcome everyone to the December meeting of the Union Township Planning Commission. It's our darkest meeting of the year, and I don't mean like content-wise, I just mean it's been dark for a couple hours already by the time we're here. So we had Pledge of Allegiance roll call, please.
Thering.
Here.
Albrecht. Here. Buckley is excused. Shingles.
Here.
Squadrito.
Here.
Lapp. Here. LaBelle.
Here.
Gross.
Here.
And McDowell. Here. Okay, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, next item is approval of agenda. So you have tonight's agenda in front of you. There are 4 new business items. Is there anything else that anyone's aware of that needs to be on tonight's agenda? If not, we can have a motion to approve the agenda. So, who wants top billing?
She can get it.
Okay, so motion by Albrecht, second by Shingles to approve the agenda as prepared. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we have our agenda, which means we can proceed with the meeting. And next item is approval of the minutes. So we met on November 21st, regular November meeting. You have minutes of that. Are there any corrections to the November 21st minutes? Looks like Amy did a good job subbing for that at that meeting. I didn't see any issues, but anybody see anything?
Make a motion to approve the minutes for November 21st regular meeting.
Support. So motion by Thering, second by Gross to approve the November 21st minutes as submitted. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that motion carries. Next item is correspondence, board reports, presentations. First item is Commissioner Thering, updates from Board of Trustees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really just 2 comments. The board passed the 2024 budget, and I believe excluding the Sidewalks and Pathways Committee, which we'll, I think, have a discussion about that later, all boards are full, which is, I think, the first time in quite a while. They have every position filled, so.
Good news.
Very, very uneventful in the sense of, so it'll get more exciting as we roll, but that's all I have for you today.
Okay. Any questions for Commissioner Thering, Board of Trustees related matters? I don't know where we would take it up, but I guess I'll ask about it now, not necessarily to you, but the reason we have this on our desks is because the joint meeting has been rescheduled, is that right? Pushed back 2 weeks?
That is correct.
Okay, so it'll be every year, for those of you who don't know, every year for a while now, the Township has conducted a joint meeting of all the boards. And it used to be in the fall, but it's been in April for the past several years. And it was originally on our original schedules, I believe it was listed as April 3rd, but as you can see, it's now April 17th, so save the date. All right, you're all invited.
Actually, before that meeting, maybe like in February, I'll be talking to you about things that maybe this board would like to see. The reason why we moved it to the April was because that's when we do our ends. And rather than the fall, when the ends are already done and we're so far away from doing the ends discussion, that's why we moved it to April, just before we begin our ends discussion. So I'll put something together just to let you know what we're asking for, and if you have any thoughts or ideas, that'd be fantastic. Or just to prepare everybody, hey, once we get to this meeting, if you have anything to say, we'd sure like to hear it. It helps us better form our ends for the year. So.
Okay, sounds good. Anything else on Board of Trustees? Okay. So Commissioner Buckley's not here. I'm guessing ZBA hasn't met since last month. So we'll move on from that. Next item is the Community and Economic Development Monthly Report. This is simply, something that's been in our packets the last several months. Unless there's something you want to say about it, I'll just open it to questions if anyone has any questions on any commissioners have questions on any of the items in the monthly report. Very comprehensive report. It's not just what we did, but it's all the other groups, and then, interactions with the public and other sorts of things. Okay.
I like seeing this, even though some of it's repetitive at times. It's all relevant. It's all things that are in the works. And if you have any idea of what's happened, if you want to have any idea of what's happening, this is just a snapshot. There's a whole lot more that happens as well. So I appreciate all the time that's spent on that.
Okay. So seeing no questions, we'll go ahead and move on from that. Are there any other reports or correspondence that need to come before us tonight that anyone's aware of? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on. So at this point, we're going to have our first public comment. We always have towards the beginning, towards the early part of our meeting, we have a public comment that is restricted to items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if there's any member of the public who'd like to address the Planning Commission on an item that is not on tonight's agenda, they're invited to do so at this time. We just ask you to give us your name and address for the minutes. If you were in the audience, which they're not, but if a person was, they'd come to the podium and speak into the microphone. But do we have anybody online?
We do not.
Okay, so our electronic room is empty also, but public comment is open at 7:08. And we have an extended public comment later in the meeting, which is for any item, whether it's on the agenda or not. And so seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that back up, and we will move on. So we're ready to go to new business. As I mentioned, we have 4 new business items. The first item is acceptance of the annual report of the Zoning Board of Appeals for 2023.
Well, thank you. You have the report. We have our updates each month, but the Zoning Board of Appeals is part of their bylaws. They prepared this report and sent it forward to you. This lists the activity that they've had over the past 12 months. They've had some interesting items on their agenda. The first one there with the Thrive Church last December. It was a full house back to the back of the conference room area back there. Anyway, this provides a nice summary of their activities. It's simply for your reference, and ultimately, in terms of an action, it would be simply a motion to accept it, the report. But you also, if you have questions or things you would like more information about from the Zoning Board of Appeals, you could also include in a motion to identify those items and ask for additional information from them. I'm happy to answer any questions about these as well.
Okay. I did see one thing that I was confused about. The second page of that report, which is item 3, and it's page 17 of our packet. it says May 3rd, 2023, but then it says during the September meeting, so I wasn't sure if that was deliberate or that was a mistake.
That's, I'm sure that's a typo.
Okay.
That should have been the May, that was the May meeting, right, Peter? Yeah, so that's a typo in the.
Okay, that's fine. I thought it was, but it could have been perhaps referring to a different meeting, but,
We have September meeting.
No, we did not have a September meeting.
okay. Were there, this isn't exactly related to the report exactly, but after that one meeting, I guess there was the, I don't know, possibility that there might be some change in personnel of the ZBA, but did that come to pass, or do we still have the same people?
No, the zoning board feels substantially different from what it was that December meeting. And that was largely, some terms ended, there's been a significant turnover in membership over the last year. We have 2 new members that were just appointed at our December board meeting. So, as was mentioned, filling some vacant slots in that board.
Okay. I was really referring, I think I was referring to the July meeting, where there was a public hearing and the consideration of what to do about it.
So that one, really, there has not been significant change. It was just the one member, Jeff, and I think he was even, I don't think he was active in that meeting. Jeff Brown, our trustee, was an alternate, and he was an alternate at that meeting date. I don't think he was actually at that meeting. I have to go back and look, but he was. But he has since stepped down to allow somebody else to be appointed to that alternate seat.
Okay. Questions from commissioners about the ZBA annual report? So not to rush anyone, but if it's your pleasure, we can have a motion to accept the report.
To accept. I'm sorry.
Okay, so motion by McDonald, second by Gross to accept the report of the 2023 annual report of the ZBA. I guess implied in the motion with the correction of the one typo on the second page. Further discussion? Just to add a little drama on the dark winter night, I would ask for a roll call vote because it is an official action.
Albrecht,
Yes.
Theron,
Yes.
Gross,
Yes.
McDonald. Yes. LaBelle,
Yes.
Shingles,
Yes.
Lapp,
Yes.
Squadrito.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so the next item is our annual report. And by the way, in case it's a secret to anyone, these great reports are written by our township staff, so I don't take credit for what you read here, although I will be signing it as if I did. But anyway, so summary of our actions for the year. Did you want to say anything, Peter? Go ahead.
So I did write the report for you guys and for you to consider and to accept it, similar to the one of the ZBA. This is required, part of your bylaws, to send a report annually to the Board of Trustees. We did have no special meetings in 2023, but we did meet every time on our regularly scheduled calendar each month. I did note here the site plans that we went over. We did not have as many site plans or special use applications as we had the previous year, but we did spend an awful lot, a great deal of our time, thoroughly going over both the Parks and Recreation Plan update, and we worked just about every meeting on the Township Master Plan update. So some highlights that I have here on here for the Parks and Recreation Plan update. Planning Commission determined that the Parks and Recreation Plan 2011-2016 needed to be updated. Planning Commission reviewed questions asked in the 2016 Township Residents Survey, identified priorities for an updated survey, and approved a list of parks and recreation related survey questions. Moving on to the Township Master Plan update. The first thing we had to consider was if the Township Master Plan needed to be updated. The answer was yes, that it did. As required by law, at least every 5 years after adoption of a master plan, a planning commission shall review the master plan and determine whether to commence the procedure to amend the master plan or adopt a new master plan. The review and its findings shall be recorded in the minutes of the relevant meeting or meetings of the planning commission. So things that you guys took into account when deciding the master plan needed to be reviewed and updated. Considered how the review would be conducted first, if it was done. And then there was a emphasis. So the Planning Commission came up with the following when considering what they would like to see in the township 10 to 20 years from now. Ideas that you guys came up with: wider, well-lit pathways, active biking and walking, safe lit areas for work and play, connecting pathways, recreational hiking and or walking, focus highly on accessibility in the parks and trails, changing stations, relevant housing inventory, ensuring that we have commercial and residential property that's appealing to people moving here, explore renewable energy structures in residential areas, an area for pop-up events, retail, food trucks, take a conscious look at the character of our industrial zoning, help to open opportunities for more advanced manufacturing. So that's what the commission thought that they'd like to see in the township 10 to 20 years out. The commission also identified some problems that they saw in the township with desired outcomes for these problems. These problems included reevaluation of the township's stance on new industries such as cannabis shops, more practical public transportation, telling developers that they cannot develop in a spot where there is no development. The desired outcomes: remaining relevant and vibrant, position ourselves to be competitive in growth, provide more amenities to bring development in. And below we have the initial steps that we took to update a tentative scope of the update. There was a general consensus for the following list of priority area for the updated master plan. We went through introduction, global ends, general statements, desired outcomes, future land use and growth management strategies, plan for economic development, subcategories, industrial and employment center plan, commercial development plan, bluegrass center area plan, east-west DDA district plans, reference to adopted development plans, plan for housing, plan for agricultural and preservation of rural character, plan for natural resources and the environment, plan for energy, community facilities and infrastructure plan, transportation plan, subcategory, plan for roads and streets, plan for non-motorized transportation including sidewalks and pathways, a zoning plan, preparation of a separate data book of existing conditions, completion of the separate Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We basically began in May, continuing through August. The Planning Commission carefully reviewed each policy statement from the 2018 Master Plan. For everyone that recalls, we would get through only so much, and then we'd have to pick up where we left off at the next meeting. It was a thorough process. In September, the Planning Commission reviewed and accepted the draft policy framework that would guide the master plan update. So then other items of business that we had, we appointed Ryan Buckley as the liaison from the Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. elected officers. Discussed ways to implement the township master plan policy recommendations. Discussed updating the township parks and recreation plan. Updated the 2024 meeting calendar, or adopted, excuse me. Two items that were different than just typical site plan applications that we had. We granted an extension for site plan PRSPR 2204, request for 365-day calendar extension. That's for the Christ Oil Filling Station at 4972 East Pickard Road. We also had a grading permit request that dealt with site plan PRESPR 2302, and that was the Hal Banks 4,000 square foot building for indoor golf, archery range, office, and related storage. We agreed to participate by resolution in the State Michigan Redevelopment Ready Communities Program. Met with members of the Sidewalks Pathways Committee. That was in the beginning of the year. And we also adopted an annual report for the Board of Trustees that we'll do this year.
Good. Thanks both for the thorough report as well as for the summary. Comments, questions from commissioners?
I just noted a couple typos on page 20. Under the planning commission discussed initial steps, master plan in the third line there needs a T. And the plan for natural resources and the environment further down in the list.
Did you have others?
Those are the only ones I noticed right now. Did you
There's
find others?
Say the first one again.
The first one was updated master plan. It needs a T. Under the
Second bullet point.
the second bullet point on page 20, the third line.
Oh, yeah.
And then down in the.
Unless we want to do a mazer plan. Should we do a mazer plan this time?
It's how amazing how often you can read through something and read right past those things.
Yeah.
So I always appreciate.
We could get like
Changing those.
lightsabers and such. Kind of change the township up.
There's one more on the last page. We're discussing the Garber project. Should be 4,000 square feet. It's just missing a zero.
Thank you.
A bunch of eyes are better than just two, right?
Anything else? Okay, so I'm guessing we would like to accept this. I certainly would. So if there's a motion to accept the annual report with the few corrections that were mentioned.
Move to accept. Support.
Okay, so we'll motion by Shingles, second by LaBelle to accept the 2023 Planning Commission annual report. Any further discussion?
Oh, also on the first page, under number 6, on the third line, Broomfield Road, the period there has an underline under it.
Okay. So let's go ahead and do a roll call, please.
LaBelle,
Yes.
Shingle,
Yes.
Squadrito,
Yes.
Thering,
Yes.
McDonald. Yes. Albrecht,
Yes.
Gross,
Yes.
and Lat.
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so the next item is a set of proposed zoning ordinance amendments. So turn it over to Rodney.
Thank you. We've gone through a couple of punch list type amendments previously. Peter and I, as we work with the zoning ordinance. Of course, we keep notes on things that come up that we may want to take a look at. And with some recent changes in state law, it reached sort of in some recent Supreme Court decisions related to signage, it reached a point where we felt it was time to bring something forward to you to make you aware of our list and see if this was something you were comfortable with moving ahead on as in this form, to go ahead and prepare some updates. Some are small, some are not. The first two, item A and B, these are some things that simply we took note of. There was a minor conflict in the boarding house definition and the regulation. We found it would be valuable to add the two types of residential uses you note there, simply because the community has a need. We want to make sure we're not inadvertently excluding a lawful land use in our community, so adding these dormitory housing and the other state-managed residential facilities to the list of allowable uses in certain zoning districts will help take care of that. Some of the big ones, our first big one is item C on the list. And this is, I think as we spoke previously, the state has made a significant change related to how utility scale solar and utility scale wind energy facilities are going to be regulated. They did adopt the bills that were going around the legislature this year that almost completely takes away local control over these two types of facilities. And the governor signed that legislation early, I think right at the end of November. And those bills will go into effect next November. I think it's November 14th is the official date when they become effective. For us, we have to make some decisions related to both wind and solar because the new laws mandate that our local ordinance must either exactly match the rules that the state has now mandated, including the setbacks in height and other things that they have specified in the law, or essentially all local control disappears from us, and these facilities would not be regulated at all by the township, but instead would be entirely regulated by the Michigan Public Services Commission, an agency that has never done this sort of thing before. So we're about to see the creation of another brand new bureaucracy in Lansing, probably similar in scale to the marijuana folks, in order to make this possible. Peter has just attended a workshop on this topic, and so I asked him to kind of share some things that he's heard about the new laws.
So as Rodney indicated, this is brand new, very recent. There's not a lot of information on what to do exactly and what how to proceed and how it's going to affect everything as everybody works through it. But what the one thing that the training did recommend is for townships to look at a compatible zoning ordinance. That's pretty much the first step of deciding whether we want to take ourselves completely out of the process or not. If we do not have a compatible ordinance, it is the Michigan Public Services Commission that will handle the process. Okay, so utility companies and developers can apply for a certificate with the Michigan Public Service Commission. If utilizing the state process with the MPSC, applicants submit various application materials to the MPSC. If a township has a compatible renewable energy ordinance, the application is considered by the township. If the township does not have a compatible renewable energy ordinance, the MPSC considers the application after a contested case proceeding in which the MPSC will order funds to be given to local units to participate in the proceeding. Now, when if we have an ordinance, a new renewable energy ordinance, the guidelines that the Act gives us is that we cannot be more restrictive than the provisions included in the Act. Section 226.8 provides the utility scale solar projects must follow the below standards. Setbacks, 300-foot setback from buildings on non-participating properties, 50-foot setback from the edge of the public road right-of-way, 50-foot setback from the property line of a non-participating property, National Electric Code compliant fencing, maximum solar panel height of 25 feet when solar arrays are at full tilt, no louder than 55 average hourly decibels on the A-weighted scale at the wall of the nearest non-participating dwelling, dark sky friendly lighting solutions. And so that is basically it. There was a discussion on things that will have to be worked out because they are missing from the legislation. Those include requiring decommissioning securities to not include salvage values of project components as they may be speculative, standards for glare, continuing escrow funds for townships to use to retain experts to review project complaints from the public, post-construction studies to verify sound and glare output, landscaping screening requirements, fabric screening on fences surrounded solar projects or landscaping around solar projects, insurance requirements, complaint resolution requirements to develop a system where project owners, operators can address public project complaints directly before involving a township, road repair agreements. Another item that was brought up in the training is the definition of what a residence is, because it speaks to setback from a residence, but that is not, it's not known whether a residence on a property could be an accessory building or it has to be the principal building. It speaks just to residence when it comes to some setbacks. Another interesting topic is the idea that we haven't, isn't as common, is the idea of battery storage projects for where this energy can be stored at. I believe there's only a few in the state of Michigan right now, but it is a growing use that they expect to see more of. Right now, an issue with battery storage facilities is an issue with fires and internal fires, and basically, from what I've been told, with each time something like this happens, it gives the company a chance to better engineer the storage facility and work on it, but that is a problem that they're working on in the industry. They did say that due to advancements in solar energy, that there is comparable rates between solar and natural gas, which wasn't always the point, or always was. A driving force behind a lot of the solar wind energy is DTE, requiring making a goal to have net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So that's one of the driving forces when they use the term developers or applicants. It's not just you or I, it's big companies that are driving this change. To give you an idea of how much land is going to be needed for these type of large projects, they said that solar projects with a 50 plus megawatt is going to require at least 200 acres. Wind projects with 100 plus megawatts would be double that size. And so when you look at areas large enough in each township, you're not going to have probably very many of them, just due to the size amount of land that is needed for each one of these projects. One of the things that also the MPSC is going to take into consideration is the amount of farmland available in each municipality and how approving these types of projects will affect farming in that community. They said that that will be an emphasis when approving these types of projects, that how many are already in existence and how that relates to keeping farmland in that community. That basically summarizes what they have for us right now. Is there any questions?
What do they consider utility scale? Is it 50 megawatt? Is that considered utility scale, or?
Well, it's essentially, you can have utility scale solar facilities that are as small as a few megawatts. These laws are really looking at the very large operations that Consumers Energy or DTE Energy might want to put in place to help meet their renewable energy goals. But they can be small, as 20 acres, 30 acres, there's a number of those kinds of facilities.
And then the townships would have oversight over the less than, how's that defined?
Well, poorly. It is not clear how all that will settle out right now. The answer is at this point that we're waiting for answers. As much as Peter invited questions, a lot of those questions are ones that more information, more understanding of this law. This law was, these bills went through the legislature in a remarkable hurry. They were actually in two tracks, as we talked about, I think. They had a set of House bills and a set of Senate bills that were identical, and they were trying to get them going through as quickly as they could. Essentially, the House bills beat the Senate bills. So the law itself even refers to one of the Senate bills because we weren't sure which one was going to get to the finish line. So it references both just in case. But anyway, they went through very fast, and generally when that happens, there's a lot of things that are unknowns.
And the other question I would have is they specified setbacks and things like that. But if there's a block of landowners that say, well, we're not going to lease unless we have a 400 foot, does that take some of that out of the landowner's hands? Because a lot of times in some of those provisions, like those leases, like oil and gas lease, they can, the landowners, you get a block of, if they want to lease it bad enough.
Like a
the
deed
landowners-
restriction or something?
Well, they can drive it. They can drive decommissioning. I mean, the landowners themselves can define, kind of drive the language in the lease.
They
Go
can.
from with the landowner to the.
Yeah, I think it's certainly private contracts or private contracts. So if there are provisions in a private contract, that's fine. Typically, the way the leases have been pursued is the companies have gone around and gotten, you might almost call it pre-lease. They've gotten an agreement that will allow them to proceed with a leased facility if they can get whatever approvals they need to build it. And usually that pre-lease is very broadly worded. It's an easement on the property, and it simply allows the company to come back at any time they, in the future over 20, 30-year term of this easement and hit something more. That document usually doesn't have any of those kinds of provisions in it because that discussion is not happening yet. It's just simply, hey, we want to know that we can use your property if we can get this thing approved. There are a lot of those leases out there. A number of companies went through the state of Michigan, and there's a ton of those kind of pre-leases or easements that are out there right now. The other issue is that certainly with Consumers Energy, they have committed to buying the land. And so in that case, of course, that would be out of the picture. Now, I think they're shifting a little bit of that, but they were committed to buying tens of thousands of acres of land to own it and build their facilities on it.
Well, my initial reaction when I read this is the same as my reaction now, which is, I guess unless other thoughts occur to me, I would rather see us modify our ordinance and stay in the game than just kind of mail it to the MPSC. Yeah.
For information, locally at least, I think it'd be very hard necessarily for local people to know what was going on. I think having it go through the planning commission,
Right.
even if it is without a lot of ability to act on it, at least it gets it into the public record and provides a forum for people to respond to it.
That is true. Yeah, the law does have a provision in it. Did they talk about that, about the companies? I'll share what I know. I just didn't read, but the law requires the applicant, the developer of these facilities, to hold a local meeting and they sort of acting as sort of, private planning commission, you might say. They are responsible for doing a public notice so many days before their meeting. They're responsible for notifying the elected officials so many days before the meeting. And so there is a sort of quasi information process out there. That meeting with the developer, if there's no decision making, the developer simply has to hear what anybody says when they come in, and that developer's responsibility under the law is to report back to the Public Service Commission a summary of the meeting. I'm not sure of the minutes. I think it's just a summary that has to be prepared. So there's sort of a minimal public input element, but it's not anything with teeth in it. And I agree, certainly if we did adopt an ordinance that was compatible, that would at least require them to come before you for local action.
It sounds like, though, if it comes to us in the form of a site plan, we couldn't call a public hearing, could we? It sounds like we wouldn't be able to because it's not in the category that calls for a public hearing.
This is referencing a site plan, yes. That's one of the questions. There are some references to special use in the zoning act related.
Yeah.
But again, there are questions as to whether we could have a special use permit process.
Yeah.
Certainly, we have a very limited time to act. I think it's 100 days or something, 120 days to act.
That seems like one of the things they're wanting to avoid. So, all right. Other comments on this particular item? Okay. Did you want to continue with the list?
Yeah, I think
So, thanks for that. That was good summary of that.
So with regards to solar, it sounds like you'd be interested at least seeing an amendment to would match that, the state act. Okay. On page 23 of your packet, we see some other items there. Top one, item D. We've talked a number of times about chickens, non-farm keeping of chickens. We'd like to bring a proposal to you to expand what we have now, which is a very, very limited allowance for educational purposes, and just explore that a little bit with you to see if there's interest in allowing some expand activity there. Certainly Peter gets contacts fairly regularly from folks that would like to do something more. So item E is another essentially a housekeeping item to make the requirements for both single-family and two-family consistent. Item F, the same thing, just trying to clean up some potential conflicts there. Item G was actually a request we had one of my business retention meetings was with Michael Engineering, who of course was before us earlier. And they had some issues with parking where they got approval of parking. I think you remember when we had to bring some things before you, modifications kind of after the fact, you might say, because as it turned out, they'd like to want to do something a little different than their approved site plan in terms of the layout, size of spaces, that sort of thing. And we talked about during that meeting that they certainly could have proposed those changes at the planning stage, and that we work often with the engineer or site planner on those kinds of details well ahead of time, even before anything's submitted. They actually asked me where in the ordinance it allowed for modifications to parking, like an alternative parking standard, that sort of thing. In this case, although in the landscaping section, there's a modification subsection, separate, called out, you can modify landscape standards. In the parking article, it similarly allows some modifications for flexibility, but the language for that's sort of buried in the document. And so what we'd like to do is bring that out. They actually asked, would you please make that more clear that we can do these things a little differently? Because we do have a fairly flexible ordinance in some of these areas, but the parking one is sort of buried in the text, and so we'd like to bring that out. We actually have one that's not on this list here, but just came up related to electric vehicle charging stations that Peter just ran into in the last week or so. There are provisions in the ordinance that allows anybody to have electric vehicle charging stations, simply part of the parking lot. But interestingly, the ordinance says that the location of those requires planning commission approval. And that's fine if a site plan's coming before you, but in some cases, there's no need for a site plan if they're simply looking to add to an existing parking lot. So right now, we'd have to bring some kind of a plan to you for your approval of where those stations would go. So we'd like to propose that we change that and allow that to be handled administratively, simply normal zoning permit type process when we're dealing with existing lots. Of course, anything where there's a site plan is required, they'll show it on the plan. So that's a little detail, parking items. You see some landscaping ones there, section 10. A couple of them relate to reducing some standards, specifically the shrubs. We're finding that in almost every case there's been a modification related to the number of shrubs, simply because the numbers get very large very fast. And so we'd like to bring some alternative standards to you that will balance that a little better, reduce the number of shrubs that are required. Also look at front yard landscaping in certain districts, like the industrial districts. And again, this is from discussions with Michael Engineering is one, where we ran into the issue with the landscaping in the front yard simply because of utilities that were out there. But there are other good reasons to look at that standard again. So we'd like to, with your agreement, we'd like to bring some modifications to your to take a look at for those items. I guess before we move on, I'm happy to answer any questions about any of those. Any thoughts you have?
Everything I've heard so far makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Item I is another big section. As we've worked with the sign ordinance, I think we've made some minor tweaks to it in terms of the punch list or amendments we did. We're just finding there's a need to really go back and look at that again. The idea is to simplify in some cases. There's some elements that are simply overly complex as it's set up. Some of it's simply format to make it a little easier for people to understand what the rules are. We've also had a few cases where there are some regulatory conflicts that have come up. One that Peter and I just discussed today in the office districts, where the same section, higher on the page, it says that wall signage in office districts cannot be illuminated. You go down half a page and it says they can. It's a difference between a paragraph up here and the table of regulations down below. So a few places like that, but overall, we'd like to clean that up and try to simplify it, make it a little easier for folks to work with. The other things come up is we've had a couple of court cases, Supreme Court cases, that have added some clarity related to signage and content-based regulation and some other things that it's worth going back and making changes to our ordinance just to make sure we don't have any issues in those areas related to those court cases. The item J is more or less a housekeeping item. Item K, the top item there is an interesting one that I would like to bring to your attention for your thoughts. We've had a number of final site plans recently where your action is basically, we love it, it's approved as presented. That has not always been the case in the past, but we work hard to work with the applicants and again, the site planners to try to have that final site plan be ready to construct. There are no questions. The questions have all been dealt with on the preliminary site plan stage. Things like, if a sidewalk needs sidewalk construction should have temporary relief, we try to have that dealt with on the preliminary site plan stage. If they need any modifications, landscaping, parking, or other things that you have responsibility for, we try to have that on the preliminary site plan so you can take a look at it at that early stage and give direction, with the idea that the final site plan is basically, we just check, make sure everything was done, it meets all the requirements, and it's ready to construct. So working with the site planners and applicants, we're getting more into the point where we're comfortable that more of the plans that come before you as a final site plan are going to be in that stage where they are ready to go, rather than still needing conditions or changes or anything like that. So we'd like to at least present it as an option to you to consider, having an allowance in the ordinance that when staff finds that it is ready to go, that there are no conditions or no issues, no changes that need to be made, that it is something that where the final site plan could be approved administratively. Any final site plans that still need direction from the planning commission, like changes to landscaping or policy choices like sidewalks or simply judgment calls related to is this acceptable or would you prefer to see this kind of a thing that sometimes comes up. Those would still come before you as they normally do. But just to streamline the process for those that get it right on the final site plan, that take care of everything, that would allow them to move forward as administrative approval. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that and see if this is something you would like to see in a potential ordinance amendment.
Yeah, I'd like to see what you write down.
Yeah, I mean, I think streamlining, if it's possible, is a good idea. And I agree that there have been more, well, since we went to the system of preliminary site plan and final site plan, we've had I think we've had more final site plans that were really, you looked at it and just, we just approved it with very little discussion. But not all of them. Some of the preliminary site plans have been more preliminary. And so, I would say yes, let's try drafting something. I wonder whether that decision can be made. I'd like to see options where that decision might be made by us at the preliminary stage. We definitely want to see this again, versus, and another option might be that you all would decide at the later stage. Maybe that would be more flexibility, because the ones that come in where they've met the minimum standards for the preliminary but haven't really gone beyond that probably are ones we would want to see again, even if they did manage to create a final site plan that happened to be really good. Other thoughts from people? Did you have any comments on the other two items in that?
The
section?
other two, again, are sort of housekeeping details, so,
Okay.
so there's not a whole lot there.
Okay. And then you also said you're open to ideas if anyone has thoughts about other items that aren't on this list that should be looked at, so I'll open it to the group here to, if you've had anything that has occurred to you, at any point really, to, if you want to give voice to it now. I can't say that I necessarily have. There's always things where a thought will occur, like when we're considering something, and I don't always write them down and then, but typically they end up in the conversation, so they would, I'm assuming that most of them are reflected here, so. I think I'm comfortable with what you've brought forward. Did you want, I mean, this was really just a sounding. I mean, we're not making a motion on this at this point.
I don't think, no, there's not a need for a motion. We'll proceed as we've talked about. I appreciate the comments that were given. And it's certainly not the end of this conversation. So even when we have a set of amendments, we can add to it.
Mhm.
We'll be bringing something to you maybe a couple of months, but we'll bring your drafts to take a look at.
Okay, thank you. All right, last item of new business is proposal to suspend meetings of and appointments to the sidewalk and pathways actually that prioritization committee. Says privatization. So let's make sure it's right in the minutes so people don't think we're going to be privatizing our sidewalks or something. Maybe there'll be tolls or whatever along the way. Anyway, so I think people understand this, but go ahead and give us your thoughts.
Thank you. The long title there is simply because it could be, if you chose to, a potential motion in that format. But the Sidewalks and Pathways Prioritization Committee has been very helpful in identifying quite a number of recommended areas to focus on for new sidewalks. A number of those are in place, such as down Remus Road or around the Township Hall here. We continue to work on some of the ones that were their high priorities, like Bluegrass Road, Broomfield Road, both with private development coming in and also trying to get a hold of easements that we need for the township to install sidewalks in those roads. We have basically the sidewalk the committee has not met this year, and at this point it does not have a full board, as you know. The reason it has not met is largely because we're in a situation where we have far more recommended priority areas than we can construct sidewalks over the next couple of years. As noted here, we certainly have priorities to keep us busy in terms of construction for the next 2 years at least. So with that in mind, our thought is to, our recommendation is to simply let's call it mothball the committee's activities. We call it suspend here for a period of time until they're needed again. And at that point, we simply reconstitute the committee and put them back to work, identifying additional areas to work on. So the other reason, beyond the fact we simply have a lot of recommended areas to work on already, is that we are looking at, and I think you probably saw it in the monthly report on the long-range items, is to update the sidewalk ordinance. Right now, the sidewalk ordinance was adopted in 2009. Our policy about temporary relief was sort of grafted onto it. The ordinance does not talk about that policy or the ability to even grant temporary relief. The ordinance is not really tied or connected into our master plan, or there are opportunities to improve it. And one of the areas that we may want to look at improving is how this committee might work, or even if the committee needs to be in the ordinance. Right now, it's called out in the ordinance. You, as a plan commission, can create a committee to take on a specific task, research, or evaluate at any time. And it can be a committee of plan commissioners. You can also form a committee that where you have a township residents or others join it as well. So there's not necessarily a need to have the committee called out in the ordinance. So for these reasons, our recommendations to take an action to suspend their activities until they're needed again. And you at any time can call them back into action again. If you do that, we would be communicating to each of the members of the committee and expressing our thanks for their service, just as we do with anyone that completes a term on any of our boards and commissions. So, with that in mind, I'm happy to answer questions, but that's really the background of why we brought this to you today.
When you talk about reconstituting it as needed, would it be the same people that are serving right now, or would it have to be a process of bringing in new people?
Well, right now, almost all the terms have ended.
Okay.
Kim Rice is the board representative. Her term matches her term of office, so that's next year. Obviously, Stan's term matches his planning commission term. But other than that, I believe the other community members' terms have ended.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
yeah, essentially, the committee would need to be reformed at that future date.
Okay.
Would this be something that would be put on our planning commission agenda a few times a year, even if we do nothing but just acknowledge it? So there's, not that it's, I understand from your perspective it's not going to be forgotten, but it may not be foremost in our thoughts. So just to at least have it on there to say, hey, this is where we are.
We could. We're going to be working on the master plan, which we intend to have the sidewalk path, non-motorized transportation, of course, is an important element of that from a planning perspective. As we talked about, and it's in our framework, we want to tie this idea of this temporary relief policy. We want to tie it, put it in the master plan, so that it's tied more strongly to the long-range planning of the community. So I think it's certainly going to be on the Plan Commission's mind all through the year. We absolutely, if you would like to be on the agenda, we can make sure it's on the agenda at whatever frequency you would like.
Just so long as we talk about it. The conversation may be 6 words, it might be 5 minutes. I don't know. Just a thought.
It might be something, maybe even instead of having it on every so often, really when you have completed the project of updating the master plan, that might be a good time to talk about it again, because really the sidewalk committee is part of the implementation of our plans. What do we work on now? What do we work on later? Is all part of implementation. So that might be a good trigger point. If we can even make note of that to bring it to that point in time.
Is this committee, is it an ad hoc committee or is it a standing committee?
Well, it is a standing committee in the sense that the sidewalk ordinance specifies a committee will be established, and essentially puts the Planning Commission in charge of those appointments.
I'm not sure if you can, I think we need to check in to ensure that we can have a dormant committee,
Well-
if it's a standing committee.
But what the ordinance says is that they will meet as I think it's as needed, or, so there's no schedule, there's no
Okay.
time frame. It's simply as needed. And that's why the language is noted here. So, again, it's up to you. If you would prefer not to take this step, we've checked into it. We have confidence that this is an action that's completely appropriate.
Okay. To that point, if there's work to be done by this committee, there's got to be a ramp up to it. So, one, it will start with reappointing a committee. So now we got to go out and find people to serve on the committee. That could take time. Onboarding those individuals to the committee would take time. So could that potentially have an adverse effect on timeliness and the work that needs to be done if we had a dormant committee and then all of a sudden we need them? And now we don't, right now it's a dormant committee. I've been on the committee for a year and we haven't had one meeting in that time. But there are people currently seated on the committee. So if there were, if some work needed to be done and some action needed to be taken, you know, it's not fully seated, but it's partially seated. So I guess, you know, one thought might be to still have individuals who are appointed, but, you know, say at this point it's suspended because there's nothing to be done, but we'll call you when there is. I think, I'm just concerned that it could impact some of the timeliness of work that needs to be done if there is no committee and one has to be established. How do you do it?
I guess maybe I'll give a quick description of what the committee has done in past years. It typically met 3 or 4 times a year. Go back before COVID, it was meeting more often than that. But 2020, 2021, 2022, I think it essentially met either 3 or 4 times. And you'd say the first meeting was organization, appoint somebody to be the chair, and just have a very broad discussion, a very broad. What are we thinking about? And usually as staff we would have some information for the committee, but it's kind of just a more free-ranging kind of discussion. And a second meeting would be held where that gets tightened up and priorities are identified. And the timing of that, early February, March for the first one, usually around May or June for the second one. And the reason for that second one was because it was tied to budget cycle. Our budget cycle is calendar year budget, but we start that conversation in July internally. And so at that June meeting, the sidewalk committee was identifying these are the priorities we recommend for the next fiscal year, essentially. And then there was usually 1 or 2 meetings in the fall that looked further afield. Usually one that would look out beyond the next fiscal year, but also looking at more regional discussion. Where are the connections? What do we need to do to create a more regional network, or a stronger regional network for non-motorized transportation? So that's the kind of format. What I will say is that 3 or 4 meeting schedule per year gives us a good amount of time. If the Plan Commission identifies a need, we can easily work within that, I think, to establish a committee and be able to make recommendations. Really, because we're always looking out beyond the next year. I mean, that's the whole point of our master plan. We're looking beyond the immediate horizon. So it's something where I think there would be months of lead time available to actually reconstitute the committee and onboard them, as you've said. Beyond that, what I will say is that you essentially function as in one of your roles is a plan commission. You function as a planning commission for non-motorized transportation. There's absolutely no reason, and in fact, I highly encourage you to be thinking yourselves about what are your priorities. And so, in some cases, there may not be a need for a separate committee, simply because we identify the priorities as part of the master plan update. We identify the priorities as part of our ongoing work, thinking about the future of the community. With that in mind, I don't expect to have a challenge timing-wise when there is a need.
It's related, but slightly different issue. I think we've talked before about the idea of having some sort of report come to us of exactly which sidewalks are being built, either as a list or even as a map or both. Because I think that would help to keep it, you talked about keeping it in our minds. I think being able to see what's happening would help that.
And you, that every year, is part of the annual report that's prepared and goes to the Board of Trustees. It's part of, Commissioner Thayer was just talking about with the ends policies that the Board of Trustees works on in the spring of the year. In anticipation of that, staff prepares, manager prepares an annual report, and the kind of information that you see in these monthly reports is incorporated that in terms of how staff help to achieve the ends that the Board of Trustees has identified. And of course, one of those ends is more than one end, actually is focused on this particular topic. And so as part of the report that I put together, for my part of that, is a report on the sidewalks are constructed, both sidewalks the township is constructed, but also sidewalks that have been installed by, as part of development projects or through other means. So you will see that because it will end up in my monthly report, usually in the early first quarter of the year, just because it has to be ready for that annual report that goes to the board.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, I think that would be helpful. Yeah, I'm sympathetic to the comments that have been voiced and so on, but I also, if you have a group of people and they're not meeting and they don't, if there's discussions that, need to be held and or need to be had or so on, that's one thing. But if the committee kind of goes dormant for lack of agenda items, then people kind of, it's hard to know whether if you snapped your fingers and said, okay, we're ready for you now, and it's been, a year or two, whether you'd get them anyway. So. Other comments? What's your pleasure? So you're thinking one thing we could do is to take an action to formally put the committee on hiatus?
That's my suggestion. If you choose to, my suggestion, where it says proposed to suspend, you can simply have a motion to suspend, and actually just use that wording that's been bold there as your motion, because it not only it has the action, but it says why. So that's our recommendation. You certainly don't have to do that at this meeting. If you'd like, you can postpone action tonight, and we'll have it back on the agenda next month for discussion. But as I said, you can also at any time undo this action and request or make appointments to the committee and have them become active again. So.
Okay.
We'd really, at this point, if we decided to undo it, we wouldn't be any worse off because of those that have expired, right?
Right.
The ones that haven't still aren't, and the ones that have, so it doesn't really change anything.
Yeah.
How many members are there? Is it just myself and one other? Because I noticed it's not listed, and it's not listed any longer.
Yeah, there have been 5 members.
Right, I'm saying currently.
Yeah, there really just 2 right now.
It is just 2,
that
that's what I-
are current in their terms. That's yourself and Kimberly Rice, the treasurer.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone wants to make a motion, we can have a motion or not. So it's your pleasure. if we don't if we don't make any motion, then it's simply, we've discussed it and it possibly comes back to us.
That would be up to you. I suppose if but you can make a motion to say we're not going to do this. We want to have the committee exist and we're going to find some members. You could, my thought would be is if you would like to have this come back, to simply have a motion to postpone action for tonight. That way it will carry over as old business on the next agenda. So.
You did say the committee did not meet at all this year, 2023?
Right, their last meeting was, I think that June of 22. I don't think we even had a fall meeting in 22.
I hate to have a committee of people that really we don't call upon. Whereas we can go ahead when the time comes, we're starting fresh anyway, in a sense. Not that those that were on it can't apply, but they would have to apply anyway, based on the expiring dates. So I would make a motion to suspend the meetings of and appointments to the Sidewalk and Pathways Prioritization Committee until called upon again by the Planning Commission based on the extent of previously recommended sidewalk improvements that are anticipated to be developed by the township in 2024 and 2025.
Is there a second?
Support.
So motion was by Thering with a second by Gross. Further discussion?
Yeah, just for clarification, and I think you'd mentioned this, but just to confirm that there's enough projects in 24 and 25, which is why making the proposal to suspend them, is that correct?
That is correct. If you can take a look at the township's budget. Sidewalks are in a couple of different places. In our DDA districts, they're in our east and west DDA funds. There's money in both funds for sidewalk projects. In addition to that, there's something close to $1 million in the general fund for sidewalk projects, and that are in the 2024 budget. And as I said, there are additional projects that are not in that budget that we're looking ahead to 2025. Frankly, even 2026. I don't want to go that far on this, but I think we talked about this earlier. We have applied for a federal grant. It's called Reconnecting Communities, a federal, I think, Department of Transportation grant. It's a plan grant. It's basically to provide funds for engineering projects like sidewalks, but it's intended for kind of larger projects or more complicated ones. And in this case, our focus is on connecting the area, Broadway, Isabella, Renaissance Academy, sort of Discovery Museum, that area, and connecting east along Broadway over the freeway and over to Mid-Michigan College, and also potentially into our industrial park, Enterprise Industrial Park. These are areas where we're trying to connect people to schools, people to their employment. It is a challenging area, especially to get over the freeway. So this grant could potentially help us to have the funding needed to do the engineering work, to be able to have a plan to actually construct those sidewalks that would connect the city and the township to the tribe, the Michigan College, and all that in that east area there. So it's a big project, and like I said, it's not anything that's in our budget right now, but because it's looked out in further field, but we have applied for a grant. We're expecting to get an answer early in the new year. I think February, March, or something like that was the timing. Obviously, we don't know if we're going to get it, but we have our community and this particular project was a good fit for the grant, so that's why we've gone after it. So yes, we're looking well beyond. And those are, by the way, those are areas that the Sidewalk Committee had identified. It's also an area the tribe has identified, particularly that crossing of 127. It's part of a little different version. It's part of the 2011 non-motorized plan that was adopted regionally. We have quite a few projects in the pipeline.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions? Okay, so the motion was made by Thering and seconded by Gross to suspend the meetings and appointments to the Sidewalks and Pathways Prioritization Committee. Roll call vote, please.
Shingles,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
LaBelle,
Yes.
Lapp,
Yes.
Gross,
Yes.
Squadrito,
Yes.
Thering,
Yes.
Albrecht.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. So those were our new business items. We're ready to move on to extended public comment. This is the portion of the meeting where individuals are invited to address the planning commission on any item, whether it's on tonight's agenda or not. If anyone wants to do so, we ask you to give us your name and address for the minutes and limit your comments to 5 minutes. Extended public comment is open at 8:21.
There's nobody in line.
Okay, nobody online, nobody in the audience, so we'll go ahead and close that back up, and we'll have it next month. Next item is final board comment. I will, I guess, do what I sometimes do here, which is to get a little preview of January's meeting, just in terms of what's coming up.
So projects that we're looking at is, we previously did a preliminary site plan for the Walmart pickup delivery expansion. They're working on their final site plan, so they're aware of the deadline and they're trying to work towards getting the final site plan application in on time. We have received application for a preliminary plan for a Valvoline instant oil change. This would be located on Bluegrass Road, immediately west of the Members First Credit Union. So we will see a preliminary plan for that project. And we also have, we'll be doing for the first time in our ordinance, an application for a Airbnb, short-term rental. We won't be holding a public hearing next month, but we're looking at basically, just since it's the first time that we'll be using or reviewing this type of new use in the ordinance, introducing it to you and letting you get familiar with the project, and possibly then holding a public hearing for approval in February.
Interesting. Thank you. So what's coming up next with the master plan? I gather data book and the results of the survey?
So, yes, I'm hoping, last I heard of the survey, we had 600 responses to the mailed out survey, which the folks at CMU were very happy about. They're still trickling in, so we may have yet some more with that. Last I heard on the postcard version, which was sent out to the apartment communities, rental communities, mobile home parks, areas where we didn't have parcel addresses. The last I heard on that one was 75. But I think that one probably is a little higher now too. So as soon as we have the results, we'll be sharing them with you. I'm hoping that we'll have them very early in the new year. I'm not sure if they'll get to us for the January meeting. January meeting's early. I think it's on the 16th. So, but we'll be seeing it very soon. The data book is in process, and we're also starting to initiate the work on putting together some draft language for you based on the framework that you established, and working with our engineer on the grant project that we talked about for the US 127 corridor. So how much of that you'll see in January, I don't know, but it will definitely be an important item on your agenda for most of the year, certainly pretty heavily loaded in the front part of the year.
Okay. Is the Parks and Rec master plan kind of moving along in parallel to all of this, or?
The thing we've been waiting for, the Parks and Rec plan, is that survey. Once we have
Okay.
that, then that will move, I think, pretty quickly, because we've already had some discussion of that, and we'll certainly, I think, one of the items on your agenda will be looking at the survey results specifically related to recreation, and identifying, as we did with the master plan, identifying sort of a bullet point list or a framework for things that are important to make sure are in the updated document. Our existing Parks and Rec plan, it's good structure. It's got, what we're really doing is simply updating that. With the master plan, I think we're doing a little bit more. Yeah, so there will definitely be in parallel. I think there'll be some meetings where we'll have both on the agenda.
Okay. Other comments or questions from board members? I know we actually, it's our longest meeting in a while, but I wanted to ask one more thing really quickly. I drive in on Broomfield every day to campus, and there's a business. It's just west of like a, I don't know if it's a B&B or what, but that old house there, and it's just east of where all the dirt and gravel is. They put in a sidewalk. It can't be more than like 50 feet long. Did they do that because we told them to, or what?
I think that's Tim Beebe.
So that's Mr. Beebe's. That's Mr. Beebe's office. And,
Okay.
He submitted an application. It was a minor site plan application, so it didn't come before you, for building, accessory building on the site. And that ultimately needed a variance, a couple of variances, I think, which he got from the Board of Appeals quite a long time ago now. The plan, that plan has not gone forward, but as part of that minor site plan, he proposed to put in that sidewalk. He could have, just as we've done with a couple other ones you've seen, we could have brought that one to you. He simply said, I'm going to put in the sidewalk. It's part of the plan. He's going to do it. He was also, I think, going to remove a small structure out front. But this was simply part of the improvements that he said he was going to do. It was not, I mean, yes, the ordinance, we have the sidewalk ordinance, it says sidewalks are required. But he did not ask for or pursue any kind of request for relief, which he could have done.
Okay.
But,
and we never, the reason we never saw it is because it was at the minor level.
Right.
Okay.
And he's not built the building yet. He's not actually done any of the items that are on the plan. As I understand, he still intends, but he has not actually pursued the construction.
Okay. Okay. So we have about 50 feet of sidewalk on Broomfield, nowhere near any others, but someday. All right, thanks.
Where is that?
Any other comments?
Just down at the golf center.
Okay, then wish everybody great holidays and peaceful and restful and all that good stuff. We've completed our agenda, so we'll stand adjourned until January.